The scream pierced through the eerie silence, shattering the darkness that shrouded the abandoned city streets. Sarah froze, her heart pounding as she strained to listen, clutching the crowbar tightly in her trembling hands. Shuffling footsteps, guttural growls, they were closing in. She darted behind a rusted car, crouching low, her wide eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The stench of decay wafted through the air, making her stomach churn. Where was the survivor who had cried out? Were they still alive? A sudden crash made her jump. Sarah peered around the car, jaw dropping as she witnessed a horrifying sight. The zombies had adapted, their movements no longer the shambling, mindless gait she had come to expect. These creatures lunged with startling speed, their decaying bodies contorting in unnatural ways as they pursued their prey. One of them, its jaw hanging open in a silent scream, leaped at a young man cowering in the middle of the street. The survivor tried to run, but the zombie tackled him to the ground, its teeth sinking into his flesh. The man's agonized cries echoed through the abandoned city, filling Sarah with dread. Without thinking, she sprang from her hiding place, swinging the crowbar with all her might. The zombie's head split open with a sickening crunch, and it fell lifeless to the side. The survivor scrambled to his feet, blood gushing from the bite on his arm. "We have to get out of here," he yelled, his voice laced with panic. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed the man's hand and they ran, weaving through the maze of abandoned cars and debris. But the zombies were relentless, their inhuman howls echoing behind them. As they rounded a corner, Sarah's heart sank. More zombies, their eyes glowing with a primal hunger, blocked their path. The survivors skidded to a halt, trapped. "This way," the man shouted, pulling Sarah down a narrow alley. They sprinted, their lungs burning, the sound of the zombies' pursuit thundering in their ears. Suddenly, the ground beneath them gave way, and they plunged into darkness. Sarah let out a terrified scream as they tumbled down a steep slope, landing in a heap at the bottom. Dazed, she pushed herself up, her hands scraping against the rough concrete. The man lay motionless beside her, his eyes closed. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she leaned over him, frantically checking for a pulse. A low growl made her freeze. Slowly, she turned, and her blood ran cold. Dozens of glowing eyes stared back at her from the shadows, their owners advancing with purpose. These zombies were different, smarter, organized. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. She had to get the man to safety, but with the horde closing in, their chances of survival seemed slim. As the zombies drew nearer, Sarah tightened her grip on the crowbar, steeling herself for the fight of her life. This was no longer a mindless horde. These creatures were learning, adapting, and becoming more dangerous with every passing moment. The nightmare was only just beginning. Sarah's knuckles turned white as she gripped the crowbar, her eyes darting around the dimly lit tunnel. The man beside her groaned, his eyelids fluttering open. We have to move," Sarah whispered urgently, her gaze fixed on the advancing horde of zombies. The man struggled to his feet, wincing in pain. "What happened?" he asked, his voice ragged. "We fell," Sarah replied, sparing him a brief glance. "There's no time to explain. We have to get out of here now." The zombies were closing in, their inhuman growls echoing through the tunnel. Sarah knew they had to act fast, but the man's injured state made escape seem impossible. Suddenly, a faint light flickered in the distance. Sarah squinted, her heart racing with hope. There, maybe that's a way out. Without hesitation, she grabbed the man's arm and began to guide him down the shadowy corridor, the zombies hot on their heels. The creatures moved with a newfound agility, their movements no longer the shambling gait Sarah had become accustomed to. As they approached the glimmer of light, Sarah's eyes widened in horror. It wasn't an exit, but rather an open doorway leading to what appeared to be some kind of underground facility. The zombies surged forward, sensing their prey's desperation. "We have to keep moving," the man yelled, his voice strained. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. They plunged through the doorway, finding themselves in a dimly lit room filled with outdated computer equipment and discarded supplies. The zombies followed close behind, their decaying bodies contorting as they pursued their prey. Searching frantically, Sarah spotted a heavy metal door on the far side of the room. There, we can barricade ourselves in. The two survivors rushed toward the door, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Sarah pulled the door open, ushering the man inside before slamming it shut and sliding the heavy lock into place. They were safe for now, but the sound of the zombies pounding against the door sent a chill down Sarah's spine. These creatures were relentless, and they were learning. As the two survivors caught their breath, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other horrors this underground facility held. The nightmare was far from over, and she knew that they were dealing with an enemy that was rapidly evolving, leaving them powerless to stop it. The pounding on the door grew louder, the zombies' inhuman roars reverberating through the dimly lit room. Sarah and the injured man pressed their backs against the heavy metal barrier, their hearts racing. "We need to find a way out of here," the man said, his voice trembling. "Those things won't give up." Sarah nodded, her gaze sweeping the cramped space. Abandoned computer terminals lined the walls, their screens dark and lifeless. Scattered debris and overturned furniture suggested a hasty evacuation. "There has to be another exit," she murmured, her eyes narrowing in determination. "We can't stay here." Steeling her nerves, Sarah pushed herself off the door and began to carefully navigate the room, the man following close behind. The pounding grew louder, the zombies' relentless assault sending a chill down her spine. As they reached the far end of the room, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. A large window, its glass shattered, offered a glimpse into a cavernous chamber beyond. But it was what lay within that truly horrified her. Dozens of zombies, their movements no longer the shambling gait she had come to expect, swarmed the dimly lit space. These creatures were different, their bodies contorted and mutated, their eyes glowing with a primal hunger. "What is this place?" the man whispered, his voice laced with dread. Sarah shook her head, her mind racing. "I don't know, but we need to find another way out. Those things—" She trailed off, unable to finish her sentence. Turning away from the window, she scanned the room once more, her gaze finally settling on a metal hatch set into the floor. Crossing the room, she tugged at the latch, relieved to find it unlocked. "This might be our only chance," she said, gesturing to the hatch. "We have to take the risk." The man nodded, his face pale. "Lead the way." Without hesitation, Sarah pulled open the hatch and peered down into the darkness beyond. Taking a deep breath, she began to descend, the man following close behind. As they climbed down the ladder, the pounding on the door grew more frantic, the zombies' cries echoing in the enclosed space. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears, the weight of their situation threatening to overwhelm her. But she knew they had to keep moving, to find a way to escape this hellish nightmare. The zombies were learning, and if they didn't act quickly, they might never survive. The ladder seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness below a gaping maw that threatened to swallow them whole. Sarah's arms burned with exertion, but she refused to slow her descent, driven by the urgent need to escape the horde of zombies above. As her feet finally touched the ground, she quickly stepped aside to allow the injured man to join her. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and Sarah felt a shiver of dread run down her spine. "Where are we?" the man whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah shook her head, her gaze sweeping the shadowy corridor they now found themselves in. "I don't know, but we need to keep moving. Those things won't be far behind." They began to move cautiously down the narrow passage, the soles of their shoes echoing against the concrete walls. Sarah gripped the crowbar tightly, her eyes darting from side to side, searching for any sign of danger. Suddenly, a loud crash from above caused them both to freeze, their hearts pounding. The zombies had breached the hatch, their twisted forms now descending the ladder. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized they were trapped. "This way," the man called, grabbing her arm and pulling her down the corridor. They ran, their footsteps pounding in time with the frantic beating of their hearts. As they rounded a corner, Sarah's eyes widened in horror. Dozens of zombies, their bodies contorted and mutated, lurched towards them, their jaws gaping wide. These creatures were unlike anything she had seen before, their movements fluid and coordinated, their eyes glowing with an unnatural intelligence. "We're surrounded," the man cried, his voice laced with panic. Sarah's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. They couldn't go back, and the zombies were blocking their path forward. Glancing around, she spotted a heavy metal door to their right, its surface marred with deep scratches. "There," she yelled, grabbing the man's hand and pulling him towards the door. "It's our only chance." They barreled through the doorway, slamming it shut behind them and sliding the heavy lock into place. The zombies outside howled in frustration, their assault on the door echoing through the cavernous space. Sarah and the man stood, their backs pressed against the barrier, their chests heaving. They had managed to escape the horde, but they knew that their respite would be short-lived. These zombies were learning, and they were determined to stop them, no matter the cost. The pounding on the door grew more frantic, the zombies' unearthly howls reverberating through the cavernous chamber. Sarah and the injured man pressed their backs against the metal barrier, their hearts pounding in their ears. "We can't stay here," the man said, his voice tinged with desperation. "They'll break through eventually." Sarah nodded, her gaze sweeping across the dimly lit space. It appeared to be some kind of underground laboratory, with rows of desks and equipment lining the walls. In the center of the room, a large, circular platform stood, its surface covered in strange markings. "Maybe there's another way out," she murmured, her eyes narrowing in concentration. Pushing herself off the door, Sarah began to carefully navigate the room, the man following close behind. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and she couldn't help but shudder at the thought of the mutated creatures waiting just beyond the barrier. As they approached the central platform, a sudden movement in the shadows caught her eye. Sarah froze, her grip tightening on the crowbar, her heart pounding in her chest. A figure emerged from the darkness, its features obscured by the dim lighting. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the creature stepped into the light, and she realized with a sinking feeling that it was no ordinary zombie. This creature was different. Its body contorted and mutated, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intelligence. It moved with a fluid grace, its gaze fixed on the two survivors. "What is that thing?" the man whispered, his voice trembling. Sarah shook her head, her mind racing. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here now." They turned to flee, but the creature moved with startling speed, blocking their path. Sarah swung the crowbar with all her might, but the creature easily dodged the blow, its movements almost feline in their agility. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the chamber, and Sarah's blood ran cold. More of the mutated creatures emerged from the shadows, their glowing eyes fixed on the survivors. "We're trapped," the man murmured, his face pale with terror. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope as she caught sight of a staircase leading up to a balcony on the far side of the room. "There," she cried, grabbing the man's hand and pulling him forward. They ran, the mutated creatures giving chase, their unearthly howls filling the air. Sarah's lungs burned, her legs aching, but she refused to slow down. They had to reach that balcony, no matter the cost. As they climbed the stairs, Sarah's heart sank. The door at the top was locked, and the mutated creatures were closing in fast. They were running out of options, and the nightmare seemed to have no end in sight. Sarah and the injured man pressed their backs against the locked door, their chests heaving. The mutated creatures below howled and snarled, their glowing eyes fixed on their prey. "There has to be another way out," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We can't stay here." She scanned the balcony, desperately searching for any sign of an escape. The room below was dimly lit, the strange markings on the central platform casting an eerie glow over the scene. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized the creatures were climbing the stairs, their movements fluid and coordinated. "They're coming," the man cried, his voice laced with panic. Without hesitation, Sarah pushed the man aside and swung the crowbar with all her might, connecting with the first creature's head. The zombie crumpled to the ground, but more were close behind. Adrenaline coursing through her veins, Sarah fought with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed. The creatures were relentless, their mutated bodies contorting in ways that made her stomach churn. As she swung the crowbar, she caught a glimpse of a door on the far side of the balcony. "There," she yelled, grabbing the man's hand and pulling him towards it. They ran, the mutated zombies in pursuit. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears as she fumbled with the door handle, praying it would be unlocked. To her relief, it swung open, and they stumbled through, slamming it shut behind them. Panting, they found themselves in a dimly lit corridor, the sounds of the creature's assault muffled by the closed door. "We need to keep moving," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They won't be far behind." The man nodded, his face pale with exhaustion. They began to make their way down the narrow passage, the air thick with the stench of decay. As they turned a corner, Sarah's eyes widened in horror. Scattered on the floor were the remains of what appeared to be a research team, their bodies mangled and twisted. The sight filled her with a sense of dread, and she knew that they were dealing with something far more sinister than a typical zombie outbreak. "What is this place?" the man whispered, his voice trembling. Sarah shook her head, her mind racing. "I don't know, but we have to keep going. Whatever's happening here, we need to find a way to stop it." With renewed determination, they pressed on, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The nightmare was far from over, and they knew that the mutated creatures were only the beginning of the horrors they would face. Sarah and the injured man hurried down the dimly lit corridor, their footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. The stench of decay was overwhelming, and Sarah couldn't help but glance nervously over her shoulder, half expecting to see the mutated creatures in pursuit. "We need to find a way out of this place," the man said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Sarah nodded, her mind racing. They had managed to escape the horde on the balcony, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the creatures caught up to them. And what was this place anyway? The scattered remains of the research team had filled her with a sense of dread, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were dealing with something far more sinister than a typical zombie outbreak. As they rounded a corner, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Ahead of them, a massive metal door stood, its surface marred with deep scratches. The faint sound of movement on the other side sent a chill down her spine. "We have to get through that door," she whispered, her grip tightening on the crowbar. The man nodded, his eyes narrowing in determination. Carefully, they approached the door, Sarah's heart pounding in her ears. As they reached for the handle, a sudden, deafening roar shattered the silence, and Sarah whirled around, her eyes widening in horror. The mutated creatures had found them, their glowing eyes fixed on their prey. Without hesitation, Sarah swung the crowbar, connecting with the nearest creature's head. The zombie crumpled to the ground, but more were close behind. "Get the door open," she yelled, her voice strained with exertion. The man fumbled with the handle, his hands trembling. Sarah fought with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed, her crowbar striking with deadly precision. But the creatures were relentless, their movements fluid and coordinated. Suddenly, the door swung open, and the man grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her through. They stumbled into a massive, dimly lit chamber, the sound of the creature's assault echoing behind them. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the scene before them. Rows of tanks lined the walls, each one containing a mutated, grotesque creature. In the center of the room, a massive, pulsing generator hummed with a sinister energy. What is this place? The man whispered, his voice laced with horror. Sarah shook her head, her mind reeling. I don't know, but we need to find a way to shut it down. Whatever's happening here, it's only going to get worse. They moved cautiously through the chamber, their footsteps muffled by the hum of the generator. The mutated creatures were on the other side of the door, their unearthly howls a constant reminder of the danger they faced. As they approached the generator, Sarah's eyes narrowed in determination. They had to find a way to stop this nightmare, no matter the cost. Sarah and the injured man stood before the massive, pulsing generator, their hearts pounding. The creatures on the other side of the door were still howling, their assault relentless. We have to shut this thing down, Sarah said, her voice laced with determination. It's the only way to stop these things. The man nodded, his face etched with fear and exhaustion. But how? It looks like it's powering everything in this place. Sarah's gaze swept the chamber, searching for any clues. The rows of mutated creatures in the tanks sent a shiver down her spine, their twisted bodies a testament to the horrific experiments that had taken place here. Suddenly, her eyes landed on a control panel near the base of the generator. Without hesitation, she rushed over, the man close behind. This has to be it, she muttered, her fingers flying over the buttons and switches. If we can shut this down, maybe we can stop the creatures. The man stood watch, his eyes darting nervously towards the door. The pounding was growing louder, the creatures' cries more frantic. Hurry, he urged, his voice strained. Sarah gritted her teeth, her brow furrowed in concentration. Just as she was about to give up, a loud hum reverberated through the chamber, and the generator began to slow, its pulsing light dimming. Yes, she cried, triumph washing over her. But her celebration was short-lived. The door suddenly burst open, and the mutated creatures poured into the room, their glowing eyes fixed on the survivors. Sarah and the man scrambled to find cover, their weapons at the ready. The creatures advanced, their movements fluid and coordinated, a stark contrast to the shambling hordes they had faced before. As the creatures closed in, Sarah knew that they were running out of options. But then, a spark of inspiration struck her. The tanks, she yelled, gesturing towards the rows of mutated creatures. If we can destroy them, it might stop the creatures. The man nodded, his face set with determination. Together, they began to systematically destroy the tanks, the sound of shattering glass and the screams of the creatures filling the air. The battle was fierce, the creatures relentless in their pursuit. But as the last tank crumbled, a deafening roar shook the chamber, and the creatures began to convulse, their mutated bodies collapsing to the ground. Sarah and the man stood, their chests heaving, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had done it. They had stopped the nightmare, at least for now. As they surveyed the carnage around them, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other horrors this facility held. The zombies had learned, had evolved, and now they knew that the threat was far from over. But for now, they had survived, and that was all that mattered. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, their bond forged in the crucible of this hellish ordeal. The nightmare was over, but the battle had only just begun.